Alright, first long-form devlog here. I wanted to talk to you guys about an interesting game I've been working on. So there's this unique challenge I've been facing, which is how can you sculpt in a 3D space with something like your thumb on a screen, right? It's kind of hard to think about. How'd this whole thing start? I had this crazy idea, random idea actually in the middle of nowhere. I was just walking around in the street. I'm actually here in Mexico visiting my in-laws. And I remembered this game I used to play on the computer called Powder Game 2. It's this very simple sandbox game. You can spawn all sorts of particles on this 2D plane, and they interact with each other, right? Like lava, when it touches sand, makes more lava. Or gas, when it touches fire, it ignites and combusts, right? Lots of cool interactions in this 2D space, and I thought, I wonder if anyone ever made that game in 3D. And it's funny, these crazy ideas, right? That's something I actually really love about being a developer, being an engineer, being a game developer, right? Is that you can take these crazy ideas and turn them into a reality. And that's something that's just brought me so much joy every time I create something new, to see it come to fruition, right? So what is Powder Game 3D? Basically, this 2D game that I used to love to play as a kid, but translated into a 3D space. Of course, built on top of Godot. What other language would I use? But essentially, it's a 3D sandbox to spawn in these particles, play with their interactions, and just have a little bit of fun. Some random, chaotic fun. Now, development's not all sunshine and roses. I definitely ran into a few challenges along the way, right? Specifically, the big one was, how do I allow users to easily sculpt and place these particles in different places in the 3D space to get the interactions that they want when they only really have a 2D interface to interact with? Why is it so restricted? Because I wanted the game to be mobile friendly. I noticed that Powder Game 2 was mobile friendly along the way, and I'm planning to use the web export so that people can just easily play it online. But I want them to be able to play from their phones too. So, if you just have a touch screen, how can you go about putting the particles where you want them in the game? And there's a reason I know why it's challenging to sculpt in the 3D space. If you look at a lot of the tools out there that allow for 3D modeling, they all have different control schemes. And there's not a lot of consistency there. So you can tell that it's a difficult problem to solve. Now, before I dove in and coded this thing up, I thought of a few different ways to go about it. I know Godot kind of has some built-in functionality for navigating a 3D space, but that felt a little too complex for the simple game I was trying to create. So of these few ideas, there was one that really kind of stood out to me, and I stuck with it from the start.
On the desktop, you can use the mouse pretty much to handle everything, like scrolling up and down with the wheel. Can choose how high do you actually spawn some of your particles. Here I'm spawning a couple balls for you guys to see. And then let me scroll a little bit lower here. If you use the right click as well, you can rotate the camera in the 3D space. So maybe you want to spawn particles in like a different place or just get a different perspective. So those are some of the 3D navigation that I wanted to have.
Controls here. I've had the additional slider bars on the bottom on the left. The one on the left moves the spawn plane like the mouse wheel did on desktop, so you can spawn at different heights. And the one on the bottom lets you rotate the camera around. So this is how I handled navigating the 3D space with just the touchscreen. It's also probably worth sharing that along the way of this development, I spent maybe 3-4 days, and pretty much from like day start to day end, in between taking care of my baby or helping cut some bread, whatever it is I was doing over here, I took whatever free time I had to work on the game. And there were some moments where I made some really great progress, and there were some moments where I didn't. I actually at some point tried to do like this major refactor. I got an idea actually from Claude on like what could I do to make my fire particles sort of ghost-like, right? Most of my particles were rigid in that like they collided with each other, but fire felt like maybe it shouldn't collide with things. And this was quite different than all the other particles I had made so far. I started refactoring like my whole collision system. I think I spent maybe the second half of a day just trying to refactor this thing. And by the end of it, I realized, you know what? Is it really worth it to refactor all of this code and these working systems I had already just for one particle? And the answer was no. And it took me a few hours to realize that, but that was okay. At the end of the day, I just scrapped like all of those changes I had done and just decided, you know what, I'm gonna start from scratch tomorrow. Just focus on other things for the project, which I think was the right call in the end. Now, so far, I feel like the game's come out pretty good. There are a few things that I want to do before I can say it's done. Specifically, I want to add something called primitive objects, like, you know, maybe the player wants to put a ramp in the game, or a big ball, or a big cube, something for these particles to collide with other than just other particles. Something else I want to do to consider it maybe done is I was also thinking of doing some exports for the app stores, like Android, iOS, maybe even like an export for Windows. Just in case you don't want to run the web build and you want a little more performance, I had to limit the performance a bit for the web export just so things didn't get very laggy. So that's something else I was considering to do to call things done. Honestly, the biggest problem is I've just been enjoying it so much that I don't want to stop. It's actually a good note to turn on because I wanted to talk about that a little bit too. The reason I really put this devlog together was to have a point to reflect on the game so far. Look at what I've made and sort of try to set some finish line too. Just because sometimes I'll squirrel away hours and hours and hours on something and never really feel like there is an end coming. Which can be fine for a while, but it can also lead to some burnout. I definitely was feeling some burnout these past couple of days. Specifically yesterday, I didn't really work on the game at all for almost the entire day. I just took a break, you know. We went to go get some fresh bread from the bakery over here, which was delicious. And just ran around and did some other things during the day too. But it's important to take breaks. You know, as much fun as it can be to develop, you know, you gotta give your brain a chance to just breathe, I guess, too. I think there's some usefulness to this devlog too, in a sense of just sharing with people all the fun stuff that I did, because, you know, when I'm like really in the thick of it, it's almost like I'm going a mile a minute, and there could be so much progress going on, but if you don't share it, no one's gonna really know all the amazing things that you did. I wanted to take a chance to show you guys some of the gold that's going on under the hood, right? So that's why I'm taking the time to make this devlog, show some of the progress that I did in my somewhat of a sprint these past few days. That way, if I keep sprinting more on this game, I don't sort of lose all that, you know, all those little gold tidbits that I wanted to share. So that's why I'm making the devlog here. But yeah, let me know what you think about the game. It's available now if you want to give it a whirl. There will be updates, so, you know, check the logs. I'm putting a patch notes in there for people to see my progress along the way too. So if you're interested, check it out. Yeah, Powder Game 3D.